What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the overall market moving forward as we're seeing some new developments coming out, not to mention some new changes in the charts. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon, in just about 3 weeks. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the broader markets. Looking at SPY returning on the 4-hour time frame, showing a little bit of weakness right now. The market has seen some very, very mixed looking signals. So the question now remains, what's going to happen with this moving forward? Just know that today is Veterans Day. So I want to give a very, very big shout outs to all the veterans out there, all the servicemen and women as well who are currently active. I just want to honor everyone out there that served in the U.S. Armed forces or any different branches of the military. And also, once again, to all the veterans, I just really appreciate you guys for your sacrifices and all the hard work. But just know that because it was Veterans Day, the market saw that the banks were closed, and so was the bonds market. So that really slowed down volume. That's why we saw a lot of choppy price action, a lot of slowdowns here and there. That's when the market ended up kind of pulling back a little bit, just like we were kind of predicting from this point. So our prediction was correct, but the market kind of pushing a bit, then dipping down. We did get this little dip right over here, and the question now remains, what's going to happen moving forward? That's why I want to talk about this data first before I break down more details. So just know this, the market was very, very mixed today. We saw tech a little bit more red. We saw Nvda and Apple sell off, which led the market down. So did Microsoft. Google is a little bit in the green, but most of tech were a little bit weaker, especially the ones that have bigger impacts on the market. Then we have finance, which was a little bit more in the green. Retail was kind of red, and then everything else was very mixed, especially consumer durables being led by Tesla. Tesla's a big anomaly, really, really pushing, continuing its momentum, and still remains very strong. Now, for data that came out, just know that today was Veterans Day, so there was no data that came out today. But for tomorrow, it's going to be Tuesday, November 12th. Remember that at 10 o'clock a.m., we have Waller giving a speech. Then we have very, very minor pieces of data coming out throughout the day, like the economic optimism report, a couple of bill auctions at 11:30 a.m. Then we have Kashkari, Harker, and Barkin also giving speeches. So a bunch of Fed speakers are giving speeches and very, very minor data. Now, for the Fear and Greed Index, this is currently at greed. That's making up the majority of sentiment right now, which goes to show that, yes, the market could dip a little more here and there, but their buyers are still present. They're going to try to defend this. They could easily push this to new all-time highs. The market remains elevated and quite strong. Momentum is at greed right now, so we're seeing the S&P 500 very close to its 6,000 psychological area. That is very, very important. We were talking about this in my video yesterday. We did dip closer to it again, and we'll be watching to see if we end up getting a bounce from there or not, but there could be a little dip coming because of this. We're at these extremes, so typically when you hit these extremes, you do slow down just a bit before we continue higher. There is a chance that that could be what's about to come. The put to call option ratio is dipping because we're starting to see a lot of these shorts being closed. If you look at the market net flow right now, we're actually seeing an influx of these buy orders that are coming out. We're seeing a slowdown in those the sell orders, if anything. And what's been happening for the last couple of days is a short squeeze by definition, maybe like a gamma squeeze for some tickers like Tesla, because we're seeing short-term options being closed. We're starting to see a lot of hedging that's going on because of it. We're continuing to see shorts being squeezed essentially, and that's the reason why the ratio is going down. They're closing their positions, and this is causing a little short squeeze in the market. It's still continuing to this day. It might start to slow down though, since we're hitting this ratio, which is where we tend to see the put to call option ratio kind of like bounce a little bit. So maybe it's about to slow down, but some tickers are still continuing this squeeze, such as like Tesla. And lastly, we have the VIX, which is continuing to fall. Right now, we're at this support zone between 14 and 15. The VIX is still showing some weakness, so we'll just have to see how it reacts to that. With that being said, what do I see for earnings? We had Monday.com in the morning. They had decent earnings, but their growth and guidance were not too strong. That's why the share price went down. Besides that, we have Zeta and Grab announcing earnings. I'm not going to talk too much about those. I want to focus more on these for tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be Tuesday. We have Shopify and lots of retail like Home Depot and Hertz announcing their earnings. Shopify is going to be the biggest one. Can't wait for that alongside the Home Depot. And then we have SoundHound as well after market closed, and Spotify. And then on Wednesday, we have Cisco and a few more. And then Thursday and Friday are more important as we have Walt Disney, not to mention Alibaba. So be prepared for these earnings. We have another round of big earnings towards the end of the week. Tomorrow is going to be important because of Shopify and Home Depot, but that's pretty much it. So what do I see for the share prices of the market? What is my prediction, at least for us moving forward? I'm just going to focus on technical analysis at this point. So just know this, we're on a bit of a downtrend right now on SPY. We're starting to slow down, at least on an intraday basis. But there's no guarantee we're just officially dumping or anything like that. This could just be a small little dip after so much upside. I also want to call out the fact that 600 is a very, very tough area psychologically, right? As soon as we hit 600, we're starting to see the market slow down. That's no surprise, and that's what I was predicting would happen in my video from yesterday. So look at the daily showing a little bit of weakness. So is the 4-hour on SPY. This typically signifies a little bit more downside could be coming, especially because we're selling off a bit more in the after hours. So there's a risk of this getting closer to about 597, the low of the day, if not to where this imbalance happens to be around 595. So I do think we might dip a little bit more, but then I think there will be buyers that come back and they might try to launch this back up to all-time highs because I don't think the buyers are quite done. So I think that SPY has support at 598. If that fails us, especially 598.25, that's previous resistance becoming support. If we lose that, we're looking for essentially 597, which is the low of the day right here. And if that fails us, we go back down to the 595s. Resistance, if we get back above 599, we're looking for 600 to 601 is our resistance area. I know very, very tight levels. I know that, guys, but that's because the market's at all-time highs. I presume the most likely case is when you look at the trend that's slowing down momentum, that's shifting with a slowdown in volume, especially considering the fact that we're still selling off. We might dip a little bit more. We might get close to at least 597 again, if not below that. 595 is a possibility. That's where we have this new imbalance, which is where this green bar happens to be. So this might attract us a little bit lower, but then the market could still get a bounce because there's still a lot of greed present in the markets. So we might be looking for a little bit more downside before we try to bounce as the most likely case. And we'll see what happens after that. As far as ES goes, we basically have this 6,040 area as our resistance. Our main support is going to be at 6,020, not to mention 6,000 flat. I think what's going to happen to ES is the fact that we're making lower highs right over here. So we could be dipping closer to about 6,020. And if that fails us, I think we could get very close to about 6,000 flat, dip a little bit more right over here. Once we hit those lows, we'll be watching to see if we get a bounce or not. But for now, there is a risk of this kind of dipping a little bit more. So there could be a 4-hour divergence forming on ES. It has a risk of kind of like popping and maybe dipping a little bit more, closer to 6,020 to 6,000 flats. But then there will be buyers most likely trying to defend the lower we get into the 6,000s. So I think it could dip a little bit more before we start to see some buyers step in. We'll be watching for a big test tomorrow if we get that bounce closer to 6,000 or not. It could even be happening during the pre-market session, so just keep that in mind. But overall, the market has potential. Nvidia is showing some weakness. So on the 4-hour, we are kind of rejecting. We did call out some downside in my video from yesterday and also today. And now we're trying to hold our 145 area, our 20 EMA. If we lose 145, we're looking for 143.5 as our support, not to mention 142. If we're above 145, we're going to try to hold this and try to rebound for 147. My guts tells me that this is going to try to hold. Might shuffle a bit here before it tries to rebound just a little bit. Might be a little rebound on Nvidia for 147. We'll see if it gets a rejection or not. And if we lose 145 and hold below it for 4 hours or more, we are going to be dipping. So it's trying to hold 145. Typically, you try to see like a little rebound off our support. That's typically what happens as long as there's no bad news. And we could be looking for a retest of 147 and some consolidation right over here. That's likely the most probable case, but we'll see how things end up going. For Bitcoin, we pumped very nicely to just under 90,000. We're slowing down a bit. Might try to push again, so it's still very, very strong. We got to try to get back above 88,000. Otherwise, we could retest 85,000 and bounce. So just be careful, guys. But overall, Bitcoin remains bullish. It's very, very bullish, very, very strong. Another ticker that's very strong is Tesla. Tesla was range bound between 358 and 336. A very, very huge range, but Tesla was still holding it. So I think the share price remains more bullish. We could attempt to see something very similar to today for tomorrow. A lot of consolidation and another momentum mover tries to break out. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So if we go back on the chart like this, it was very sideways today, but it did still push. It gapped up. It basically dipped, pumped, dipped, pumped. So it's just trading sideways. I think we're going to see something very similar tomorrow. We're going to try to push up to these highs around just under 360. We come back down to about the 345 area and just continue to trade sideways. And I think Tesla will ultimately still try to push more because there's no sign of the trend breaking. If we lose 340, though, our 200 EMA on the 5-minute time frame, there could be a risk of it coming back down to fill that gap. But overall, there's no sign of that. It still remains bullish. So look for more upside. Look for a little bit of a dip, then a bounce, a lot of sideways price action like this in this range. And then we'll see if we get a breakout even more. But I do believe it's going to try to break a little bit higher. And then it's going to hold up very, very well because so far that's what Tesla's been doing. Now for NQ, what's possible is we had a high here, we came down, we could be making a lower high. We'll have to see about that. When you look at the 4-hour time frame like this, there is a little bit of weakness that's building here. Now, it is possible it tries to push a little bit higher to this imbalance. It's about 21,250. But if we can't break that high, there's a chance we just kind of push it, but then start slowing and curling back down to the lower 21,000s. So I think it may kind of like pop in and start dipping a little bit lower, and we'll see if it bounces or not. That's the most likely case that I'm essentially looking for. I think NQ tries to push tomorrow morning because of Nvidia potentially bouncing, and then we'll see what kind of reaction it gets after that. For the QQQ, is the same thing. Essentially, it's actually showing more weakness than NQ. Typically, this bar does lead to a little bit more of an upwards move. So there might be an attempt to push towards our next resistance at 515. It might make a lower high at 515, then start dipping a little bit lower to retest the lows before we get a bigger bounce later on. So that's what I'm essentially seeing, a little bit of a bounce right over here. There might be a little bit of a rebound tomorrow morning, back up to just under 515, before we start dipping lower all the way back down to 512, all the way down here. And then we'll see what kind of reaction we get, so just give it some time. For Apple's on a very, very interesting chart. We're actually making lower highs right over here. So one thing that's good about Apple is this. We love to bounce off 220 or very close to 220. We're going to see if we try to see buyers defend it there. I think tomorrow we try to push higher for about the 225s. Then it could get a rejection back down closer to 220 and just kind of consolidate for some time. And we'll see if we end up losing 220 or not. But I presume we're just going to be range bound for the time being as the most likely move. Just keep that in mind, guys. That's what I'm essentially presuming. As far as other stocks like NEO go, let me just say that there is a head and shoulders still present on NEO. If we lose 4.9, I do anticipate a dump is going to be coming, so just be very mindful of that. And we'll see how it goes from there. For Netflix, I was talking about how this might actually slow down off 800. However, it has not done this because we're approaching a very, very big event. It could be because we're approaching the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson fight in just a couple of days, and it's still holding up in anticipation of that. That could be one factor, not to mention the fact that they had good earnings. So, it's still holding up. It actually managed to break 800, doing better than what I was predicting. So this could try to push now for our next resistance, the new high towards 810. That's going to be our next psychological area. If we lose 800, however, we're looking for a move back down towards 795 and 787. But this is still looking more bullish. Could be going for the 810s now. As long as you don't lose 800, the share price remains more bullish. Exactly as predicted, guys, Celsius came down. This is on a bit of a downtrend right over here. Tomorrow morning, it might attempt to push a bit to about the 28s before it continues to fall. I do see a risk of it getting closer to, I see a risk of it getting closer to about the 26.5 areas. Just be mindful that there is that risk of downside. Palantir was bullish. We did call out 60 to 62 is what I was talking about would be coming, but notice that it's starting to turn over here off 62. So look for 61 and a little bit of a dip, some sideways price action to the 60 area before this starts to slow down towards 59. So that's what I presume is going to happen, a little bit of a push, a dip and some sideways price action like this before we start slowly making our way down to the 59s. Give that some time to develop. For Supermicro, we're making lower highs here. We had a high above, came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high, came down. Might push higher for basically 25 before it tries to reject and starts dipping back down to 20. That's the most likely case that I'm looking for. So we could be pushing back up for the 24s before it starts to reject and starts dipping. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. Rivian is more bullish right here, making higher highs and higher lows. Could be pushing higher. It is hitting this resistance right over here at our 200 EMA, but we'll see how things end up going with this. It has a nice double bottom like structure. If we break 11.22 tomorrow, it's going to be launching for 12. If we reject off 11.22, we're looking for a dip back down to 10.4. It all depends on that test tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, look for a test of 11.22, a little bit of a push. Will it reject or will it break out? We'll have to watch for that, but there is still potential for it. It is showing some signs that it wants to break out of this resistance. So we'll see, just to be safe, what Rivian could do if we break past 11.22 or not. We'll see. For SoFi, we broke out. I was talking about how this was looking bullish to me. And if we had broken past 13 flat, we're going to be looking for a target of 14. We actually went above that a little bit. So I'm going to assume it's going to cool off just a bit, back down to about 13.8 or so before it tries to continue to push. But overall, it remains more bullish. However, if we lose 13.5, we have this gap to fill, taking us back down to 13 flat. There's going to be a bigger drop of 13.5 fills, so we got to hold above that. So we'll see how things end up going. As far as the IWM Russell 2000 goes, we're looking more bullish. We have essentially 242 as our resistance, and we have this main support around this 240 area. We're kind of stuck in the middle. We could just continue to trade sideways for some time, but overall, the IWM remains more bullish, doing better than what I was expecting too. It could push higher for 242.5 plus. We'll see if it breaks out though, because it is still hitting some tough resistance. There's no sign of rejection. We need to lose 240 to turn back down. Otherwise, it remains more bullish. AMD is trying to rebound here, dipped a bit, now it's trying to rebound. If we hold above 147, we're going back up to 149. If we lose 147, we dip back down to 145. It's stuck in the middle. I think it's going to try to push a little higher for 149 before it rejects it again. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. For ARM, we're just range bound right over here, going back and forth and back and forth. But just know this, we're just trading sideways in a range right now. So we love to get bought up around the 140 to 135 support, and we'd like to reject off 150. As long as ARM does not lose 140, this could attempt to rebound for 143. What it's doing is it's kind of like hovering around these EMAs. See how it's just going around them like this? So there's a very good chance it's going to try to do that again, try to get back to them around the 144 area. That's the most likely case, in my opinion, for ARM. For other tickers out there, we also have Coin, which is very bullish, exploding like Bitcoin. We could be on our way for 340 or so. 340 could be our target. If we don't break past 340, if we lose 325, we're looking for our support around this 316 area, followed by the lower 300s if that ends up failing. But overall, the share price remains more bullish. We could be pushing closer to 340, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. For Amazon, we're kind of rejecting right over here. If we end up losing 205, we're looking for 200 flat as our support. It might dip a little bit more before it tries to bounce. I do think it's going to bounce soon. We have kind of like a double top, so look for a little bit more downside off this bar. Watch support at 205. If that fails us, then we're going to be looking for essentially 200.5, and then we'll see if we get a bounce off that. But I think it might dip a little bit more, 205, maybe a little bit below that before it tries to bounce. For Meta, we're making lower highs right here. We could be dipping closer to 578. 580 to 578 is going to be tested right here, and we'll see if we bounce or not. If 578 fails us, though, we dump all the way down to 573. If we hold 578, we're going to be bouncing. So look for a little bit more downside, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For Microsoft, we're making lower highs right here, so there's a risk of it dipping lower. We need to reclaim 420 and 421 to turn back up. Otherwise, there's a risk of us dipping. Look at the 415 areas, our main support, not to mention 412. Those are going to be two supports. We could dip a little bit more before it tries to bounce, so watch to see if that ends up being the case. As far as Google goes, we do look a little bit more bullish. We're forming kind of like a cup and handle. If we were to lose 180, I'm looking for 178.9. As long as we're above 180, this is favoring 182.5 as our target, maybe a little bit above that. So it might push for 182.5, and we'll see if we get a breakout or not. But Google has potential now in this setup. We'll see if this holds, but so far it's doing a good job. I called out the memes yesterday, AMC and GameStop. GameStop looks more bullish. We could be on our way up closer to about 30. As long as we don't lose 25, I favor upside for 30. And for AMC, it's following GameStop. This is following GameStop. It has a tough resistance at 4.5. If 4.5 breaks, we're looking for 4.7. If it rejects, you're going to be dipping back down to 4.38. There's potential to break out higher, so I see potential in this chart. We need to break past 4.5 to remain more bullish. DJT is trying to rebound here. Look for a test of 34 tomorrow. We did call that out yesterday. If we break 34, we're going back up for 37. If it rejects off 34, we're going to be dipping. There is potential, though, so just keep that in mind. The VIX is looking a little bit more bullish. This could signify more downside, so we'll have to see how that ends up going, so give that a little bit more time as well. The 10-year is dipping a bit to about 4.306. That's not really doing much. And the dollar remains more bullish, so we'll see what happens with that. With that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of the day. The market may dip a little bit more, but there could be a bounce coming after that as there's still a lot of buyers who are present. The market's very mixed, so make sure you watch the levels I called out very, very carefully. And I thank you all so much for listening. Just know that today is Veterans Day. For those who have breaks or holidays, hope you guys really enjoy your day and have a good time. If not, it's okay if you guys have work. Just enjoy life and do what you have to do. Thank you for listening, and peace out.